I had always believed that motherhood would soften the edges of my world, that the moment I held my baby in my arms, every harsh thing in my life would blur into the background. And for the most part, that was true. My son Oliver arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, wrapped in a serenity I had never known. His tiny breaths, warm against my skin, made everything feel possible, hopeful even. Everything except my mother-in-law. Margaret was a storm in human form, loud, stubborn, unpredictable. She meant well most of the time, or so my husband Daniel always insisted. But her habits were not just difficult. They were dangerous, and none was worse than her smoking. She had smoked for nearly 40 years, the kind of smoker who lit a new cigarette with the dying ember of the last. When Oliver was born, I naively believed she would change, if not for me, then at least for the tiny life that shared her blood. I hoped that seeing him would make her realize her choices mattered. But old habits cling tighter than hope. That afternoon, the house felt unusually still. Oliver had finally fallen asleep after 3 hours of crying. Colic, the doctor said, and I felt like I'd won a battle only I could see. I tiptoed around the living room, gathering scattered toys and blankets, feeling the faint tremble of my own exhaustion. When I went to the kitchen to start a bottle, I noticed it. The smell. Cigarette smoke. My chest tightened instantly. No, she wouldn't. I hurried back to the bedroom, my steps sharp against the wooden floor. The moment I pushed open the door, the thin stream of gray smoke hit me like a slap. Margaret stood near the window, cigarette between her fingers, exhaling slowly as if she were alone in the world. "Margaret!" I whispered hoarsely, my voice sharp with disbelief. "What are you doing? Oliver is sleeping in here." She turned, startled more by my tone than her own actions. "Relax, dear," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "The window's open." "That doesn't matter. Smoke is smoke. He's a baby. He can't breathe this." I rushed to Oliver's crib, checking his tiny chest rising and falling, my hands trembling. Margaret rolled her eyes. "I raised 3 children. They turned out fine. This isn't the 80s, I snapped, pressing a hand over my mouth when I realized how loud I was. "We know better now." "Well," she said with a shrug, "you always act like you know better than everyone." I clenched my jaw. "Please, I'm not asking for much. Just don't smoke in the house, especially not around him." Her face twisted into a smirk. "Maybe if you didn't fuss so much, the baby wouldn't cry all day." The words hit me harder than the smoke. I felt something crack, something small, but important. My eyes stung, not from the smoke, but from the sting of her cruelty. Before I could respond, Oliver stirred in his crib, letting out a tiny, distressed whimper. I scooped him up protectively. "This is my home," I whispered, voice trembling. That evening, the house stayed unnervingly quiet. Daniel came home from work tired, loosening his tie as he stepped inside, expecting the usual welcoming chaos of a newborn's home. Instead, he found me sitting on the couch with Oliver sleeping against my chest, wrapped tight in his little blue blanket. I hadn't moved in nearly an hour, too afraid the lingering scent of smoke on the walls might somehow reach him again. "What happened?" Daniel asked, his brow creasing as he walked over. I swallowed hard, my fingers brushing Oliver's soft hair. "Your mom smoked in the bedroom, right next to him." His face fell. "Not again." My eyes snapped up. "Again?" Daniel exhaled heavily and sat beside me. "She did it once, before." I thought she understood after I talked to her. A cold shock worked its way through me. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to stress you," he mumbled. "You were still recovering and—" "Daniel," I said quietly, "she put our baby at risk." "I should have known." He rubbed his face, guilt sinking into his shoulders. "I'm sorry. I really thought she'd stop." Before I could say more, footsteps approached. Margaret appeared at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Are you two talking about me?" I stiffened. Daniel stood up, trying to moderate the tension. "Mum, we need to talk about the smoking." "Oh, for heaven's sake," she interrupted, throwing her hands up. "I raised 3 children. None of them died from a whiff of smoke." "A whiff?" I whispered, unable to stop the tremble in my voice. "You were standing over his crib." She shrugged, completely unfazed. "He was asleep. He didn't even notice." "He's a baby," I cried. "His lungs are tiny. He can't protect himself." Margaret's expression hardened. "You're overreacting. You always are. Motherhood has made you impossible to live with." Her words struck deep, landing where every insecurity of new motherhood hides, the fear of not being enough. Daniel stepped between us. "Mum, that's enough." But the damage had been done. I could feel myself unraveling, not with anger, but with something quieter and heavier, disappointment, a kind I didn't know how to climb out of. I need her to respect my boundaries, I whispered, rocking Oliver gently as he stirred. This is my home too, and my son. If she wants to be here, she needs to follow the rules. Margaret scoffed. Rules? Since when do I need permission to see my own grandson? It's not permission, I said. It's safety. She stared at me, her jaw tight, indignation burning in her eyes. You're blowing everything out of proportion. One cigarette won't kill him. My breath caught. You don't get to decide what risks my child takes. Daniel touched his mother's arm gently. Mom, please, just stop smoking inside. It's not a big ask. Her eyes softened for a moment, just a flicker, before she stepped back. Fine, she muttered. If the two of you want to live in fear, that's your choice. She walked away, the scent of smoke. The next morning felt heavier than usual, as if the house itself carried the weight of last night's argument. I woke early, cradling Oliver close as I walked quietly to the kitchen. The air still held the faint, stale scent of smoke no matter how many windows I'd opened. I hated that, hated how her choices lingered long after she was done. I was warming a bottle when I heard soft footsteps behind me. Margaret, she didn't speak, but the sound of her presence made my shoulders tighten. She moved around the kitchen as if nothing had happened, opening cabinets, reaching for her mug, humming softly. It was the humming that bothered me. Casual, careless, too light for everything hanging between us. Good morning, she finally said, her tone clipped. Morning, I answered, keeping my eyes on the bottle. She watched me for a long moment. I could feel her gaze, heavy and disapproving. You know, she started, in my day mothers weren't so dramatic. I closed my eyes briefly. Here we go. We didn't have to worry about every little thing. Babies grew up stronger because we didn't coddle them. I turned, holding Oliver against my chest, his sleepy face resting peacefully. This isn't about coddling, I said quietly. It's about protecting him. She leaned against the counter. You think I would ever intentionally hurt my grandson? No, I admitted. But smoking near him is harmful whether you mean it or not. Her jaw tightened. You act like I'm some kind of danger. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence answered for me. That was when Daniel walked in, rubbing his eyes. Morning, he said, voice rough with sleep. But his face stiffened the moment he saw ours. Everything okay? No, Margaret said immediately. Your wife seems to think I'm a threat to my own flesh and blood. I felt the accusation burn through me. I never said that, I replied. I said smoking inside is dangerous. It's the same thing, she snapped. You're treating me like I'm careless. Like I don't love him. Daniel stepped between us. Mom, please, let's not start this again. Her eyes glistened, not with softness, but with wounded pride. You're choosing her over your own mother. Daniel froze. I felt the floor shift beneath me. This was the moment she wanted, a wedge driven right down the middle. Daniel sighed. I'm choosing what's best for my son. For a heartbeat, Margaret looked stunned, truly stunned. Then her face hardened. If you feel that way, maybe I should leave. She grabbed her coat from the chair, her expression a mixture of anger and heartbreak. And for the first time since she moved in with us, I didn't stop her. Because love should never come at the cost of a child's health. Margaret didn't leave that morning, not completely. She stormed out of the kitchen, muttering under her breath, but instead of packing a suitcase or slamming the front door, she hid herself in the guest room. I heard the lock click, a childish sound for a grown woman, yet painfully fitting. The rest of the day unfolded in thick, uneasy silence. Daniel left for work early, clearly overwhelmed, leaving me and Oliver alone in a house heavy with tension. I spent most of the morning in the living room, playing soft music to drown out my own thoughts while Oliver kicked gently on his playmate. His innocence was a balm I desperately needed, but even that couldn't stop the creeping sense of guilt. I didn't regret standing up for my son. Never that. But I hated the divide it created. Families weren't supposed to feel like battlegrounds. Around noon, I decided to check on Margaret, not because I felt obligated, but because she was still Daniel's mother. And whether I liked it or not, she was part of our lives. I knocked gently on the door. Margaret? Can we talk? No answer. I hesitated, then tried again. I'm not here to argue. I just want to understand. Still nothing. I sighed, turning away. As I walked down the hallway, I felt a familiar worry settle in. I never wanted things to escalate to this point. I only wanted safety, respect, peace. Later that afternoon, when Oliver finally drifted into a long nap, I found Daniel sitting on the front porch, elbows on his knees. He looked exhausted, not physically, but emotionally worn down. I talked to her, he said quietly when I sat beside him. She feels Pushed out. Like she's not needed. I frowned. That's not true. I know, and I told her that. He rubbed the back of his neck. But you know how she is. She hears what hurts the most. I rested my head on his shoulder. I never meant to shut her out. I just can't compromise when it comes to Oliver. I don't want you to, he said softly. You're right. You've always been right about this. For a moment we simply breathed together. Then he added, she said she might go back to her sister's place for a while. My chest tightened. Did she say why? She thinks giving us space will prove a point. Whatever that means. He shook his head. Honestly, maybe space would help. I didn't disagree. But as the sun dipped behind the houses, casting its warm glow across the porch, a thought crept in, soft but unsettling. If space could heal, it could also widen the distance. And once a crack forms in a family, sometimes it grows deeper than anyone expects. Margaret finally emerged from the guest room late in the evening. I heard the soft creak of the door, then the slow shuffle of her feet down the hallway. Oliver was already asleep in his crib, his tiny breath steady and warm against the dim glow of the nightlight. I stood near the doorway, listening as she approached the living room. She looked different, not angry, not defensive, just tired. Her eyes were puffy, and the wrinkles around them looked deeper than usual, as if the weight of the last 2 days had carved new lines into her face. She stopped when she saw me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt fragile, like stepping onto thin ice. She cleared her throat. I talked to Daniel. I nodded slowly. She fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. It was strange seeing her uncertain. Margaret never hesitated, never second-guessed herself. But now she looked at me the way a child might look at a teacher after doing something wrong. I didn't realize, she said quietly, that it mattered that much to you. It's not about me, I replied gently. It's about Oliver. She winced at his name. I know smoking is bad, but I guess I thought one cigarette here and there wouldn't hurt. Her voice broke a little. I didn't think you saw me as a danger. I don't, I said immediately. I never did. But I have to protect him, Margaret. His lungs are so small. Even a little smoke is too much. She sank slowly onto the couch, her shoulders slumping. When you grow up in a different time, she murmured. You think the old ways still work. You forget the world changes. I sat across from her. We're all learning, even me. I don't know everything. I'm learning as I go. Her gaze softened, and for the first time since the argument, I saw the grandmother she wanted to be, the woman desperate to matter, to feel included. I love him, she whispered. He's my first grandchild. And sometimes I feel like there's no place for me here. The vulnerability in her voice startled me. That's not true, I said. We want you here. Daniel needs you. Oliver will need you too, just not the smoke. She let out a trembling breath. I can try to quit. I've never said that before. But maybe it's time. Emotion welled in my chest, unexpected and warm. I'd support you, I said. We both would. You don't have to do it alone. Margaret nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. I don't want to lose my place in this family, she whispered. You won't, I promised. For the first time in days, the air shifted, not cleared entirely, but softened, like a storm finally beginning to move on. Outside, the night settled quietly around the house. Inside, the first fragile steps toward healing had begun. The next morning began differently, quieter, softer, almost cautious. I woke to the sound of gentle clattering in the kitchen. For a moment, I thought it was Daniel. But when I stepped out with Oliver in my arms, I saw Margaret standing at the counter. She wasn't smoking. Instead, she held a cup of tea, her fingers tapping nervously against the ceramic. She looked up when she heard me, and for the first time in days, she offered something that resembled a smile, even if it was small and unsure. Morning, she said. Morning, I replied. Oliver stretched in my arms, yawning, and Margaret's expression softened instantly. That look, full of love, was the version of her I wanted Oliver to grow up with. Can I hold him? She asked, voice tentative. Of course. I gently handed Oliver to her, watching as she cradled him with surprising tenderness. She rocked him slightly, humming an old tune I didn't recognize. For a few moments, the house felt whole again. Then she glanced at me. I called a clinic this morning. I blinked. Clinic? For quitting, she explained. They said they can schedule me for counseling and patches. It won't be easy, but I want to try. Emotion swelled inside me. I'm really proud of you. She looked down at Oliver. He's worth it. Daniel appeared in the doorway then, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When he saw his mother holding Oliver, and me standing beside her without tension hanging between us. He looked almost relieved to the point of tears. "You two worked things out?" he asked cautiously. I nodded. "We're getting there." A long exhale left him, like a weight he didn't realize he carried finally dropped. "Good," he murmured. "That's really good." For the next hour we moved around the kitchen like a family again. Tentative, yes, but trying. Margaret even offered to cook breakfast, and although the eggs came out slightly burnt, the gesture alone felt like healing. But healing wasn't immediate. Later in the afternoon, I found Margaret sitting alone in the backyard, staring at a half-empty packet of cigarettes. Her hands trembled as she held it, torn between craving and regret. I walked over and sat beside her. "Rough day?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "You don't understand. Smoking has been part of me for so long. It feels like losing something." "I know," I said gently. "But you're making space for something better." She looked at me, eyes glistening. "For him? For you too." In a slow, deliberate movement, Margaret stood, walked to the outdoor bin, and dropped the packet inside. It wasn't the end of the struggle, not by a long shot, but it was a beginning, a hopeful one. And for the first time since the conflict started, I believed our family could move forward, together. The following week unfolded like a series of delicate steps, each small, each fragile, but each moving us in the right direction. Margaret had enrolled in the clinic's program, and although she tried to hide it, the struggle showed. Her fingers often twitched, her jaw clenched during quiet moments, and sometimes she snapped over little things only to apologize immediately after. But she didn't smoke, not once. I made sure to acknowledge her efforts, not out of obligation, but because I could see how much it cost her. One afternoon, as I handed her a cup of herbal tea, she looked at me with eyes that carried the weight of 40 years of habit. "This is the hardest thing I've ever done," she admitted quietly. "I know," I replied. "And you're doing it for all of us." "For him," she corrected, glancing at Oliver as he giggled on his playmate. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. His face lit up when he saw his mother lying on the rug beside Oliver, holding up a small stuffed elephant while he reached for it with chubby hands. "Look at you two," he said, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Margaret chuckled softly. "He likes the crinkly sound." Daniel sat beside them, ruffling her hair, or trying to, because she swatted his hand away with a mock glare. The moment felt warm, genuine, the kind of memory families are built on. Later that night, after Margaret went to bed, Daniel pulled me close. "I can't thank you enough," he whispered. "For being patient, for giving her a chance, for not giving up on us." I rested my head against his chest. "I didn't give her a chance for her," I said honestly. "I gave it for Oliver. And for you." "And now?" he asked gently. I smiled. "Now, I'm glad I did." But the next morning tested everyone. I found Margaret in the backyard, pacing. Her hands shook, her breathing uneven. When she saw me, she froze, ashamed. "I almost did it," she whispered. "I almost bought a pack." I walked to her, steady and calm. "But you didn't." She shook her head. "I don't know how long I can keep doing this." "You don't have to do it alone," I said. "Let me help. Let Daniel help. That's what family is." Her eyes filled with tears, raw, unfiltered emotion. "I never realized how much I needed you." I reached out and held her hand. It was cold, trembling, but she let me. And in that moment, I understood something important. Sometimes family isn't healed by grand gestures. Sometimes it's healed in small moments. A hand reached out, a habit resisted, a boundary respected. And together we stepped forward again. The days that followed settled into a cautious rhythm, one built on small victories and quiet understanding. Margaret's withdrawal symptoms came in waves, some days gentle, others harsh enough to make her retreat to her room without a word. But each time she emerged, she did so without the smell of smoke clinging to her clothes. And that alone felt like progress. One morning, as sunlight poured through the kitchen window, I found her sitting at the table staring at a brochure from the clinic. Her fingers traced the edges slowly, distractedly. "You okay?" I asked, setting Oliver in his high chair. She looked up, her expression unusually vulnerable. "They want me to join a support group. In person," she sighed. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You don't have to be ready," I said gently. "You just have to show up." She let out a half laugh. "You make it sound so easy." "It isn't," I replied. "But neither is doing it alone." Her gaze dropped to Oliver, who slapped his hands happily against the tray. "He's going to grow up breathing clean air," she murmured. "I want that." "Then take the next step," I said, reaching across the table. "You're stronger than you think." She didn't respond, but she squeezed my hand in acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, Daniel came home early. Another surprise. He scooped Oliver into his arms and kissed the top of his tiny head before turning to us. "Mum," he said gently, "I heard about the support group. I think it's a great idea." Margaret frowned. "You think I need it?" Daniel smiled softly. "I think you deserve support." "That's different." Her gaze softened, and for a moment she looked smaller, almost fragile. Maybe I could try one session." "That's all anyone can ask," I said. She nodded slowly, and something in her posture eased, as if admitting she needed help untied. A knot she'd been carrying for years. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood by Oliver's crib, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. The room felt lighter now, clean, safe. But what surprised me was the feeling in my own chest. Gratitude. Not just for Oliver's health, but for the fragile peace forming within our home. For the first time since the chaos began, I felt hope, not forced or fragile, but real. The kind of hope that grows when people choose effort over pride. The kind that tells you a family doesn't break because of conflict. It breaks when no one tries. And finally, we were all trying. The day of Margaret's first support group meeting arrived sooner than any of us expected. She dressed carefully, smoothing her blouse 3 times before finally stepping into the living room. There was a nervousness about her, a quiet trembling, beneath her usual stubbornness. But there was also resolve. Daniel drove her, leaving me and Oliver at home. I watched from the doorway as she hesitated before getting into the car, glancing back at the house as though unsure if she could truly do this. When our eyes met, I gave her a small nod, one that said, "You're not alone." She nodded back. When the car disappeared down the street, I took Oliver into my arms and whispered, "Your grandma is trying, little one. She's trying for you." The house felt strangely still without Margaret's footsteps or her soft humming. It made me realize how much space she occupied, not just physically, but emotionally. For better or worse, she had become woven into our daily life. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "Daniel. She's doing good. Proud of her." I smiled, feeling warmth settle in my chest. When they returned home, Margaret looked lighter, not entirely free of her burden, but as though she had set some of it down. She stepped into the living room, saw Oliver babbling on his playmate, and her face softened into something almost luminous. "How was it?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "Hard, but good. I didn't think I'd fit in, but there were people there just like me, people who want to change." "That's brave," I said. "Really brave." She blinked quickly, emotion stirring behind her eyes. "I didn't think you'd ever trust me again." I stepped closer. "I never lost trust. I just needed you to understand why it mattered." Margaret nodded. "I understand now. More than ever." She kneeled beside Oliver, lifting him gently into her arms. He squealed with delight, reaching for her necklace. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in months. "I want to be around for him," she whispered. "I want to watch him grow. I don't want my habits to take that from me." I felt tears prickle my eyes. "And you will. One step at a time." Later that evening, after dinner and bath time and bedtime stories, the 3 of us sat on the couch. Not as adversaries, not divided by stubbornness or fear, but as a family. Margaret leaned back, a blanket draped over her legs, and sighed. "You know, I never imagined I'd be learning new things at my age." Daniel smiled. "There's always something to learn." She glanced at me. "And I'm grateful you pushed me, even when I didn't want to hear it." I reached over and gently touched her hand. "We're all just trying to do what's best for him." Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening. "Then let's keep doing it, together." And for the first time, I believed completely that we truly could.